New details are emerging about that catastrophic Baltimore bridge collapse. This video offers a new vantage point of the cargo ship approaching the bridge early Tuesday morning. Yesterday, federal investigators went on the vessel to collect evidence and speak with crew members in an attempt to understand the cause.
Chanel, the NTSB investigation is really in its early stages. This is something that can take 12 to 24 months before they are prepared to provide a probable cause for this accident. Teams were on board the cargo ship Dolly yesterday. The board chair described the damage as extensive, the scene as massive. She said she found herself looking out across the mangled mess on the deck of that ship, looking at where the bridge used to be and thinking about the families of the 6 people, the lives lost in this accident, and the people recovering, the survivors. Now, they have a lot of questions. They do have the vessel audio and data recorder. That is a far more rudimentary system than what we're used to in aviation with a black box. The black box on an airplane records 1,000 pieces of data. These record far fewer. So they have some information. They will have more as they pour through it. They are also going through the engine room, looking for other devices that may have recorded information, things like video cameras or any sort of event recorder that's in the engine room that may give them some sense as to why the ship lost power the way it did. They're also going to pour over any video of the incident from outside. We know there's at least one camera that captured the whole thing. That will be helpful to investigators as well. But at this point, there aren't a lot of clear answers. There are people that are being praised. The Mayday call from that ship gave police about 2 minutes to stop traffic on that bridge, cut it off, to eliminate the possibility that additional people would drive on as that ship was on a collision course. The Secretary of Transportation yesterday saying that action and the fact that this happened overnight likely kept this from being a far more tragic event. The investigation has a long way to go. There are a lot of questions we just don't have answers for yet, Chanel.
Chris, thank you.
Let's begin in Baltimore, where divers have recovered 2 more bodies from that devastating bridge collapse. 4 victims are still missing, and meanwhile, federal investigators boarded the disabled cargo ship that crashed into the bridge to interview crew members and to recover the ship's black box.
Chris Van Cleve is following the latest on this story from Maryland this morning. Good morning, Chris.
Well, good morning. There were 21 crew members and 2 pilots on board that ship when the collision happened. Now, search and recovery teams have said they're not able to reach those 4 remaining bodies until some of the wreckage and debris in the waterway it gets cleared out. So this is now a salvage effort. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we're also seeing new images of the ship, what it looks like on board, and learning new details about the final minutes leading up to disaster.
It's just utter devastation.
New video this morning aboard the cargo ship Dolly as investigators begin gathering evidence among the mangled mess blocking the Patapsco River after the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed.
It's a massive undertaking for an investigation. It's a very tragic event.
An NTSB review of the ship's voice data recorder shows the Dolly left port at 1:07 Tuesday morning. Less than 20 minutes later, the first sign of trouble. The vessel appears to lose power. About a minute and a half later, with alarms sounding, the onboard pilot called for help, asking nearby tugboats to respond. But the ship was already heading into a worst-case scenario collision course. Less than a minute later, the Dolly made that critical life-saving Mayday call, giving police time to close the bridge.
Hold all traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching that just lost their steering.
The first responders, who were really moved heroically after the first Mayday was called, were able to both move towards keeping additional cars from coming on the bridge.
They had less than 2 minutes to act before the collision. The NTSB says the Dolly held 56 cargo containers of hazardous material. That's more than 760 tons. Some of those containers were sheared open, leaving a sheen on the water.
There is no threat to the public from the hazardous materials on board.
The investigation is just beginning, but has the benefit of this video. How helpful is the video that shows what happened?
Certainly it is helpful. but the NTSB has to focus on data that we are able to validate.
I can't believe that happened.
Michael Singer helped set up the camera for a maritime interest group, never realizing it would capture such a tragic moment of history.
It's iconic to the city. You know, people connect with it. It's really shocking that it's gone.
Now, the Navy is sending barges with heavy lift cranes. The Army Corps of Engineers and Coast Guard also have resources coming to the Baltimore area. That will be the salvage effort in order, one, to get those 4 remaining bodies, but also to get the waterway clear so the Port of Baltimore can reopen. It's the nation's 9th busiest port. Some 8,000 port jobs hang in limbo with the thing shut down. Chanel?
Chris, tell us a bit about the recovery efforts for the final 4 victims there.
Well, it's going to require a lot of heavy machinery to be brought in by boat. And then they're going to have to start picking these pieces up out of the river. The span of the bridge that came down, concrete, pavement, steel, that's all got to be removed to get access to the vehicle or vehicles that the search and recovery teams believe are still essentially encased in debris.
And as for the cause, what are the next steps for the NTSB investigation?
It's going to be a long investigation. The NTSB expects this will take 12 to 24 months before they're able to give a probable cause for what went wrong. Today, they are getting back on board the Dolly. They're going to be continuing to talk to crew members as well as those bay pilots, folks who come on board to help navigate the ship out of the harbor, who were on board there trying to mitigate this disaster before it happened. So those interviews will be ongoing, but this will be a slow process, and it will be probably incremental. This will not be something where they expect to have some smoking gun piece of evidence emerge in the next 24 hours that answers all of our questions.
Okay, good to know, Chris. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report at the remnants of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. NTSB drone footage shows the cargo ship that took down much of the 1.6-mile-long structure, its bow girdled in steel and stacked with asphalt. CBS crews captured video of its on-ramp, which now leads only to reminders of disaster. Handheld and drone cameras are used to capture photos before cleanup, the start to what is expected to be a 2-year investigation. Also a part of Phase 1, conducting interviews with the ship staff, reviewing the ship's Voyager data recorder, engine data, manufacturer information, and inspection and maintenance history. Then at least 6 specialized teams piece together those details for a report containing the cause and sequence of events. And finally, the NTSB will issue safety recommendations, though those could come earlier in this case. Chris Van Cleve has the latest.
From the water, the scope of the accident is enormous. The cargo ship Dolly is almost as long as the Chrysler Building in New York City is tall. The wreckage sits where it fell early Tuesday morning, blocking access to one of the nation's busiest ports. We're surveying the damage with the commander of the Army Corps of Engineers.
The president called me yesterday and we spoke for a few minutes, and he made it clear this was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' #1 priority.
Will this be an around-the-clock effort?
We're going to go 24/7.
That sounds like a massive effort.
It is a massive effort.
General Scott Spellman's team will work with crews from the Navy and Coast Guard to begin the salvage efforts to clear the waterway and allow divers to recover the remaining 4 bodies believed to be trapped beneath the rubble.
It's not just all this debris that you can see in this massive cargo ship. It's also everything that's sunk to the bottom. Tons of debris that's 50 feet down. It all has to come off the floor before this channel and the Port of Baltimore can reopen.
Already, there is a traffic jam of cargo ships unable to get in or out of the Port of Baltimore, plus 2 cruise ships that won't be able to return to the Charm City port that employs 8,000 people.
This is a core economic engine for our state, and we have to make sure that our workers are protected.
New video shows traffic early Tuesday morning on the Francis Scott Key Bridge and that construction crew filling potholes, moments before the Dolly slammed into it. And now, our first look on board the giant vessel as NTSB investigators work to gather evidence and continue interviews with the ship's 21-person crew. The Dolly's voice data recorder shows about 90 seconds after the first sign of trouble, the onboard pilot called for help, asking nearby tugboats to respond. Less than a minute later, the Mayday call. Then the devastating collision. The damage on board is extensive. Part of the bridge came down on the bow, leaving a deep gash. Cargo containers with hazardous material sit sheared open.
When you get out here on the water and you look at that, you really get a sense for the massive effort that we're dealing with.
The Army Corps of Engineers has to clear a 700-foot wide channel to get the port back open. Now, the Navy is bringing in the largest floating crane on the East Coast overnight. It can lift up to 1,000 tons, but they think the piece of bridge laying across the ship weighs 3 or 4 times that. John?
Wow. Chris Van Cleve. Thank you, Chris. The NTSB says more than 30,000 vehicles used to cross the bridge daily. When it collapsed, it was the construction workers repairing the road to keep cars flowing who fell into the water. 2 rescued, 6 dead. Nicole Skenga has more on the lives of the victims.
Baltimore County Police survey the wreckage from 1,200 feet.
Nothing prepares you for a boat colliding into the bridge.
Even after you see it, and it's still just so surreal.
In the hours after the collapse, this thermal imaging technology was used to scour for victims.
That was our main focus that night around 4 a.m. When we first got here, was utilizing the thermal imaging just to try to locate anybody.
Transmitting real-time images like these to those on the ground.
Oh, wow. So that's a vehicle.
On Wednesday, Maryland State Police pulled the bodies of Alejandro Hernandez Fuentes and Dorlean Castillo Cabrera out of the river, but divers are unable to reach the 4 people still missing.
Because of the amount of concrete and debris, divers are no longer able to safely navigate or operate around that.
Tonight, we're learning more about the victims. The brother of minor Yasir Suazo Sandoval tells CBS News he wishes he could have stopped his brother from going to work. Moises Diaz was scheduled to fill potholes on the Key Bridge Tuesday, but his shift was changed. Every day we give thanks to God for life, Diaz tells us. He's grieving the loss of 6 fellow construction workers, men he calls brothers. I saw my friends as family members. And Diaz tells us the miraculous story of his friend Julio Cervantes, one of 2 rescued. He says Cervantes escaped his sinking truck by crawling out the window. He thought, I'm going to die here. Even though he can't swim, he survived.
Nicole Skenga joins me now from Baltimore. Nicole, what are the victims' families telling you?
John, the victims' families right now are in absolute agony. So are their friends and this very tight-knit community that we have come to know. I spoke with Moses Diaz. He was a construction worker who called all of these victims brothers. He was supposed to work on the bridge Tuesday morning, filling potholes, and had a shift change at the last minute. And he met with one of the survivors, Julio Cervantes, just yesterday and told us his unbelievable escape story, that he was in his vehicle when the bridge collapsed and sunk down, submerged in water, crawling through the window of his truck in order to escape. Didn't know how to swim, but miraculously floated to the debris where paramedics retrieved him. He is suffering from chest injuries and has stitches on his leg, but is now stable. And the real message that Moses Diaz told us tonight is that many of these immigrant families, who are, some have been in the country for quite some time, some less time, really feel as though their stories are being overlooked, that everyone is focused on the bridge, but they are really suffering. And beyond just the physical injuries right now that Julio Cervantes is dealing with, the deepest pain is his trauma. And, Moses Diaz telling us that he can't stop picturing the bridge collapse, seeing it in his mind play out over and over again.
Oh. And Nicole, you also flew with police to survey the scene. What did you see?
Yeah, we flew with the Baltimore County Police Department. These were some of the first pilots up in the air in the early hours after the bridge collapsed. And they showed us with infrared technology how they desperately scoured for victims, but were unable to find them. Now they're assisting first responders, teams on the ground, and soon some of these salvage efforts, and just giving them real-time pictures from 1,200 feet above. right now, you can see just massive amounts of debris. The ship obviously lodged under, just tons of this bridge. We know that there are cranes that are being moved right now that can lift up to 1,000 tons. So waiting on that. But we also saw floating containers, some sheen on the water, obviously concerns from NTSB and other federal and local authorities about hazardous materials right now. All of this adding up to a really long road ahead, John.
Nicole Skanga, thank you.
Officials are turning their attention towards clearing the debris from the Baltimore bridge collapse after authorities paused search efforts for 4 people who are presumed dead there. The Navy says it's mobilizing barges outfitted with cranes to help clear the river. Maryland estimates the cleanup, mobilization, and debris recovery will cost $60 million. Lawmakers, meanwhile, are discussing how the federal and state governments should share the costs to address the overall disaster. Maryland Governor Wes Moore spoke about the work that still needs to be done.
The best minds in the world are coming together to collect the information that we need to move forward with speed and safety in our response to this collapse. Government is working hand in hand with industry to investigate the area, to clear the wreck, and to move the ship.
Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us now from Dundalk, Maryland. Camilo, we know you spoke with the brother of one of those workers presumed dead. What's he saying? What's he saying in reaction to everything happening there on the ground, too?
Scott, Carlos Alexis told us that his brother, Minor, was a decent, funny, and big-hearted family man who came to the U.S. roughly 18 years ago from Honduras. He was the first in a group of siblings to immigrate to the U.S. And Carlos Alexis told us about the last time he was able to embrace and see his brother. Let's take a listen. When you were talking to him on Sunday, did you ever think that was going to be the last time you saw him?
No.
No.
Me preguntan a mí, ¿qué es lo último que te faltó decir? Si yo lo hubiera sabido, no lo dejo ir a trabajar. Y mi hijo no lo dejo ir. Si me tú presentías, Dios mío, ¿cómo voy a saber?
You would have stopped him from going to work if you had known. Scott, there's clearly a lot of anguish in these communities. And one of the reasons for that is that some of these families have not received any closure. While Carlos Alexis recognizes that his brother is almost certainly gone, the body has not been found.
In this unprecedented event, there's so many things one can say, but what else is he saying about the unique tragedy behind this particular sequence of events?
Scott, Carlos Alexis said that what happened to his brother and these other construction workers should serve as a tragic reminder to other immigrants and other workers doing dangerous jobs that they should not risk their lives for another dollar, as he put it. That is something that he wants people in the broader U.S. to take away from this tragic incident. Another challenge for this family is how to explain this to Minor's 6-year-old daughter. She's very young, she's still in school, and Minor's brother told us that she believes her father is still at work.
As the evening began in Baltimore, what were the latest updates you were getting from authorities there? What are they trying to get out?
Well, authorities right now are still trying to recover these bodies. The weather here is not helping, and so that is a major challenge for authorities here, Scott.
Now, about that, Camilo, what should we take away from the fact that those presumed dead were immigrants?
Well, immigration has always been a contentious debate here in the U.S., Scott, and we're having a very polarizing debate on this issue as we speak because of the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border. But I think most people here recognize that this country quite literally has been built by ways of immigration, from the Chinese immigrants who built the railroads in the West in the 19th century to the Irish and Italian immigrants fleeing famine and poverty who built the cities on the East Coast, to the backbreaking work that African Americans have done in this country, to Latin American immigrants who today are building our bridges, who are picking our crops, and who are keeping the lights on in many key industries. And these jobs are essential, but they are also perilous, as was tragically illustrated earlier this week. but many immigrants do them because they want to provide for their families, they want to send money back home, and because they want to chase their American dream. And after all, that was the desire that Minor had when he came to the U.S. when he was 20 years old.
All right, Camilo Montoya Galvez, thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.